Bye. Hi. Dang. Yeah, I see that Julius is just now joining. Sometimes he's here. Crazy. You're my only one. I'm about ready to go home. Take a nap. Rider for sale. Only 50 cents. Okay. Let's see. AP. Not like this. Well, okay, but Julius is still the only one in the call. Ugh. Okay. Julius. Hi. Bye. I don't know. Last I asked, it was not looking good. Unfortunately.
It was mentioned the other day, and it was.
Yeah.
I didn't answer it because I don't really have a right to.
It's not a no, but it's not looking good.
It's not probably, I think.
It's not a probably. No, and like when I asked about it, the answer I got was sort of like, that's probably not going to happen. But in case it does, here's some things you should look at. So I was like, okay, it's not, not worth just forgetting about, but probably not gonna happen.
Keep thinking about it, and don't really-
Just keep thinking about it and longing for it and wishing for it, and then you'll be disappointed.
It's the best way to do it.
Yeah, exactly. It's what this whole year is about, actually.
It's the theme of the year.
Big haircut.
Just one.
Big haircut.
But the scary part about that is you didn't say anything bad or good.
I know. Bye. I miss teaching him. Ah, hello. Why is this looking weird? What's the deal? No, that's not what I wanted to do. Very odd. That's what I want. Okay. That's not what I want. Here comes Madison.
Don't let her in.
I'm letting her in. You can't tell me what to do.
Can I ask that you don't let her in?
You can ask, but I already have, so sorry. I think Sarah is not going to come because she was dismissed from school early. I'm guessing she has an appointment or something. And Isaiah is my sole in-person student today.
Can you join the Zoom? Can you ask him to join the Zoom
Why?
so we can feel whole as a class for once?
They don't feel whole without you, Isaiah. Well, I have this, what does that mean, I back? There's no verb there. Back is the verb, and it means like you back someone, like you back Biden as the president, or, in which case, there you go. Okay, so what we are gonna do here is, first of all, I have uploaded some new pages and I want to go through them together. Not super extensively. A lot of it's pretty repetitious, I would say, but you have your 2 quizzes that are due today, and I'll give you a little time to work on those, although I see that some of you have already finished them, and that's great. But I've just unlocked 2 more quizzes, and I personally think they're some of the most important quizzes. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily really difficult. It just means I think that it's very practical, particularly for a class like this. So I'm gonna share, and I'm plugged in so you can see too, Isaiah. Plagiarism and documentation pages. Let me get rid of this little guy. There we go. I've opened it up and it's this. It's a lot, 17 pages. I'm not going to go through it like one sentence at a time. I'm just going to kind of like fly through. But your 2 quizzes that have just been opened are about documentation and plagiarism. And honestly, I think they could be combined into one because the questions are actually really similar. It's just about documenting things correctly, because if you don't document them correctly, then you can be accused of plagiarism. So this first bit is about integrating sources into your text. This is unfortunate because you don't have the book actually. But some of this you might have in the punctuation pages. But this kind of gives you the difference between summary, paraphrase, and direct quotation, and that is really an important distinction to make, because Summaries, you don't need to cite. Paraphrase, you probably need to cite, and we'll talk more about that in a second. Direct quotes, you definitely need to cite. So summarizing, you're kind of condensing a bigger idea and putting it in your own words. So for instance, there's this long quote about something. I don't know what it's about. I didn't really read it. But obviously this summary is a lot shorter. You're not just taking one sentence from there, you're boiling the whole thing down into your own words, into a shorter version of that idea. And in that case, you don't need to cite it. It may have been, you would want to like put it on your works cited page or your references page, but you don't need to directly cite an idea. Paraphrasing is when people struggle with paraphrasing, and genuinely I've had some papers where students thought they could get away with plagiarism because they literally took every single sentence from a different essay and just rewrote it a little bit. And they were like, well, it's in my own words now. No, that doesn't work. It's still plagiarism. If you're paraphrasing, you're following the author's presentation much more closely than in a summary, but you're just like rephrasing it a little bit for your own words. So let's just look at this first thing. Actually, that's so long. I don't want to. We're going to come back to paraphrasing because there's a great thing later on in this document that helps explain it a lot better, or like explain when you really need to cite it. But there are some good guidelines when you're paraphrasing. Read it until you understand it. Restate the main ideas in your own words and sentence structures. Keep the author's meaning and don't plagiarize. Direct quotation, you guys should kind of know by now about citing a direct quotation. You should try to keep the quote as short as possible. If you're working with longer quotes, you can set them off, and I'll show you more about that in a minute as well. This is kind of an important one, actually. Introduction and interpretation of source material. A lot of times people will just like find a quote that's relevant to what they're saying and just plug it in, but not really explain why they've chosen to use that quote. And in that case, you're really expecting the reader to connect some dots that they may or may not actually connect. So it's kind of up to you to connect those dots for them. A couple of, there are some good examples in here. Here's one of just like an awkward introduction to a quote. One editor disagrees with this view, and a good reporter does not fail to separate opinions from facts. That's not wrong, but it's just awkward. You should really introduce that quote a little bit better. And a better example there is, one editor disagrees with this view, maintaining that a good reporter does not fail to separate opinions from facts. You might need to change a quote a little bit in order to have it fit your paper and fit what your own sentence structure and what you're saying. You can do that. You can add a couple of words. You don't want to change the meaning, but if it doesn't quite make sense, if you don't have a word added, such as the tabloids, the way that this sentence was originally written, it didn't say of England, but clearly that's important for what the person's trying to get across. So you bracket that off. If you change it in any way, that's why you would bracket it off. Like for instance, this one, they changed fail to fails. Here they capitalized a word that was not capitalized in the original, and you're just going to set that off with brackets. This is more about like how to introduce a quote. And this, honestly, where it says dumped, this is what I see a lot of, actually. Just kind of keeping a quote on its own without introducing it and without really explaining why you've chosen to use this quote. So with this one, it says, many news editors and reporters maintain that it's impossible to keep personal opinions from influencing the selection and representation of facts. true, news reporters, like everyone else, form impressions of what they see and hear. However, a good reporter does not fail to separate opinions from facts. We can revise that and make the introduction to the quote a little bit more smooth and make a little bit more sense as to why you would have chosen that. So they kept the first sentence the same.
Order for dismissal, please.
Okay. But then to explain why they introduced that quote, yet not all authorities agree with this view. One editor grants that news reporters, like everyone else, blah, blah, blah. And here's a really helpful list of signal phrases. I would maybe look back at this as you're writing your essay. If you're trying to introduce quotes, here's a lot of good suggestions of ways that you can introduce quotes or phrases that you can use when they talk about signal phrases. It's just like phrases that signal you're about to use a quote. And there's some more just about how to use signal quotes. This is just kind of driving home the fact that you should use like if you're quoting an author, you should use their full name the first time. You can use their last name afterwards. You would never want to call an author Harold rather than Harold Lyman or Mr. Lyman or just Lyman. Because you don't.
That is insane.
Why?
Garbage dog.
You don't. I mean, you don't know him, so you don't want to act like he's your friend. It's a sign of respect. Sometimes you would want to give their credentials. Most of the time in the kind of stuff that we're writing, that doesn't really matter. That's not super important.
Dude, my cut is insane.
Your what is insane? Okay, so down here for avoiding plagiarism, honestly, like learning all that stuff above this is important because it helps you avoid plagiarism. There is deliberate plagiarism where you're like, I don't know what to write on my own. I'm going to take someone else's paper and pass it off as my own. That would be like copying something from a source and passing it off as your own by not adding quotation marks or a source citation, summarizing or paraphrasing someone else's ideas without acknowledging the source, handing in something that you copied from the internet or had a friend write or something. And there are obviously websites where you can pay for an essay, but that is also plagiarism. Careless plagiarism happens sometimes too, where you're just not sure how to cite it or what to do, and so you don't cite it. That is also plagiarism, and we want to avoid that. Here's a little handy dandy checklist for avoiding plagiarism. You can kind of go through that on your own. The internet has made it easier to plagiarize than ever before. Some stuff that you don't need to worry about acknowledging. I know sometimes people get overly conscious about, like, they really want to avoid plagiarizing, and so they just kind of cite everything. You don't have to cite, your independent material, your own observations or thoughts. If it's expressed in your own words and format, you don't have to. Common knowledge is another thing that you don't have to acknowledge. If you knew it already and other people would know it too, don't worry about it. We pretty much have to cite everything else. Is this the thing that I wanted to point out? Yeah, okay. Here's an example, and like when I was talking about people who have paraphrased entire essays, it's this kind of thing. The original quotation here was, the character and mentality of the keepers may be of more importance in understanding prisons than the character and mentality of the kept. While they have put this in their own words a little bit, the sentence structure is the exact same. They've just substituted some words for other words. They haven't changed the meaning of the sentence at all. And because of that, it's still plagiarism. And if you want to avoid that, you would still have to cite it. They've just changed. They're still using the words, the character. They changed keepers to prison officials. They kept of more importance in understanding prisons and then the character. All they really changed here is they changed keepers to prison officials and the kept to prisoners, and that's not okay. That's not your own idea. You do have to cite that. There's just giving some more examples of how you might want to do that, different options for how you can use part of it, how you can paraphrase it. We'll kind of come back to that, but just to reiterate, if you have, this is just like MLA stuff, if you have already introduced the quote by using the author's name, you can just put a page number in parentheses. If you haven't, if you've just quoted, or if you've just paraphrased, it would be author's last name, page number. This is just kind of more information about making sure that you're not plagiarizing from online sources. This is about how to document sources, which is basically what I was just talking about, MLA documentation style. And I'm actually going to show you something that's more useful than these pages for that. There's some examples of sort of like works cited pages. And okay, so that's all for that document, and hopefully that'll be really helpful to you. The other thing I wanted to show you, you should probably all be familiar with it at this point, the online writing lab at Purdue, and I linked to this in the same little announcement as I put the pages that we just looked at. But if you go to this website, you can go down here to MLA Formatting and Style Guide. And this is going to tell you basically everything you need to know. If you don't know how to cite something, if you don't know how to cite a particular format, this has got everything. You can go to Overview and Workshop, you can go to General Format. For this in particular, MLA in-text citations, the basics is probably going to be really handy for you. It talks about the basic rules, general guidelines, and then it starts getting into specific formats. Like if you have an author, this is exactly what I was talking about a minute ago. Print sources with known author, print sources by a corporate author, print sources with no known author. Basically, like as you keep scrolling down, it's got how to cite stuff for basically any format you could think of. So those are going to be really good resources for you to use. I would maybe have those open, like even as you're taking these quizzes. And these quizzes are documentation, MLA style in-text documentation, and plagiarism, appropriate quotation and paraphrase, MLA style. They're both 10 questions, but both of them, like I looked a little bit at the questions earlier, and both of them are basically they're like, what's the right way to cite this? In some of them, you'll have like an original little bit of text, like a quote, and then you'll have two examples, and they're like, which one of these cites this properly, or which one of these is a citation that avoids plagiarism. And that's basically what those two quizzes look like. So the resources that I gave you today should really help with those. Hopefully with as long as we've been looking at MLA stuff, a lot of it will come pretty naturally, but I also just kind of find that like proper MLA citation and formatting and stuff is stuff that like I have to reteach every year because it just goes out of people's heads. And I think part of that is just because like we have so many resources where we can just look it up and like look up the correct way to do it that we don't really let the knowledge sink in on our own. I didn't really have that when I was in high school and college, so I had to learn it. And it can be a little bit frustrating that I have to keep reteaching it, but I also understand why. So, like once you learn those rules, they're in your head. But the only other thing that I wanted to mention before I let you guys go and work on your 2 language quizzes that are due today is I just wanted to call attention to the due date calendar, because we only have tomorrow and next week before we leave for the holidays. You have your 2 posts that are due tomorrow, the Leinster and Johnson, the TV Makes You Smarter, and the, what was the other one? Oh, the Logic Named Joe. We'll have one more next week, and we'll have, like, I'll release the text on Monday and the post will be due Friday. So there's not really much turnaround for that one. Friday, the 18th is our last day of school before the holidays. But if you notice, I'm going to take these out that say e-learning because they're not e-learning. They're not anything. Oops. We just don't have school. But I still gave you guys a couple of days to get some stuff in. And I've done that with most of my classes because number one, we didn't know for a while if we would have e-learning days those 2 days. They were scheduled as weather makeup days. And if we had had bad weather, we would do e-learning on those 2 days, but we didn't. So we get a little bit of an extended break, which is nice. But also, you just got kind of a lot due right now. And so I'm willing to take some of this stuff past when we're in school. So right now, I have the plagiarism, MLA documentation stuff, those quizzes due on the 21st, and your essay due on the 22nd, which means you can like take that weekend to work on those and just have a little bit of extra time. If you don't want to bother with that, if you want to go ahead and get all of your stuff done and just be done with school on the 18th, then by all means, turn that stuff in earlier. That's not like you have to turn these in on the 21st. You have to turn these in on the 22nd. It's just, you have a little bit of wiggle room. You have a little bit of extra time. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen with you. I saw that several of you are finished with your quizzes, the 2 language quizzes. So that's great. You can, you can work on your posts, which we'll also have time to work on in class tomorrow. But if you haven't finished your 2 quizzes, you need to finish those now because they're due tonight. I will be on the call until 3 o'clock. So if you have questions, if you want to know what you missed on some of these quizzes for your second attempt, that's fine. We can do that. But other than that, if you guys want to, you're free to sign off and work independently. What are you giggling about?
I did not know that my mic was unmuted.
Yeah, you've just been like consistently giggling for a while.
No.
A little bit. All right, I'm turning off my camera, but if you guys have questions, just holler at me.